Hi there and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host Simon Conboy. This episode is going to be a preview of the Week 1 matchup between the Seattle Seahawks and the Green Bay Packers, two of the powerhouse teams of the NFC in recent years. And frankly, not much reason to doubt that being the case this year. Not a huge amount of roster turnover for either team. Certainly one of the most interesting matchups in the weekend, and kind of like the season opener last week, you'd think it's a game that could certainly have bye week implications when it comes to the end of the season. I would expect both of these teams to be competing for that number one seed. So we'll start with what I suppose is the star-studded matchup in this game, that being the Packers offense led by Aaron Rodgers going up against the fabled Legion of Boom, the Seahawks, the best defense of recent years. A very consistent bunch of guys. Now the Seahawks, we know what they're going to do defensively. It would be a major shock if they changed it significantly. They tend to favour their cover three with Earl Thomas sat in a deep zone, allowing Cam Chancellor to move around, play down in the box, line up in man on tight ends, which he's very good at doing. He's not great in zone coverage. He's good, but he's not great. But he's very good at lining up in straight coverage with those big guys. He's one of the best run-stuffing safeties in the league. However, the Packers, I don't expect them to really attempt to run the ball too much. That tends to be the case when you've got the best quarterback in the league and one of the better groups of receivers. So this matchup ultimately is going to come down to whether the Packers' passing game can have sustained success against this group. Now, the Seahawks have lost the last couple of games to the Packers. It was a blowout last year. However, in those games, either Earl Thomas or Cam Chancellor's been missing. We saw last year how significant a piece Earl Thomas is in particular. It's a big deal missing either one of these two guys, arguably the best two safeties in the league. But Thomas in particular enables them to play this scheme so effectively as a deep centre fielder. It allows them to have a bit more freedom to double up on some other guys. It allows them to play that 8-man front that they like to do against the run. So with both of them healthy, I'm expecting this to be a lot more difficult. Sherman will probably line up on one side, so that does mean I suspect Jordy Nelson's really the key X factor in this matchup. Whether they move him around, whether the corners that aren't Sherman will have the ability to keep him covered is very difficult to do. Aaron Rodgers and Nelson have a fantastic rapport. That back shoulder fade is something that they've absolutely mastered in terms of timing, and he's got a great ability to get open on those scramble plays. Aaron Rodgers seems to know what he's looking for in terms of where Nelson will be. They find each other an incredibly large amount in those situations. So I think that's absolutely key. Jordy Nelson's going to have to get his touches. Now, it's not just him that the Seahawks have to stop. That's why this matchup is so good. Randall Cobb and Devontae Adams are both decent players in their own right. They both have decent speed, both very good after the catch, something this offense really does emphasise. It's what makes them so hard to defend because they can turn short passes into big gains, but Rodgers is more than happy to throw things in the intermediate range and more than happy to go deep, particularly when he's on the run. So I will be expecting to see a bit more man coverage as a result from the Seahawks to try and force these guys into the middle. I think they want to stop them getting outside, try and get things across the middle where Cam Chancellor, Bobby Wagner and the linebackers can impact the passing game, because these guys can hit. With regards to the pass rush, that's going to be a fascinating matchup. I don't think the Packers line is great when it comes to run blocking, but they are a very good group of pass blockers. David Bakhtiari will have his hands full with Cliff Averill, but he's a very good pass protector, one of the top few in the league. And then at the right-hand side, you'll have Michael Bennett, or on the Packers' right-hand side, the Seahawks' left-hand side, you'll have Bennett, who will be moved on the interior in certain situations, so Frank Clark can play outside. That's going to be a good matchup. Brian Bulaga, also a very decent right tackle. The interiors where I'd have some concerns. Of course, the Packers don't, long-time starters in TJ Lang. He's gone, and Josh Sitton left last year. They've not really replaced those guys at this point. So Sheldon Richardson, the big new addition via trade from the Jets, he's got the potential, I think, to have a big impact in this game, as does Bennett when he's moved inside on passing situations, which we could well see a lot of in this game. This line, combined with the linebackers, I think they're going to be a lot better against the run with the Richardson addition. Once again, I don't think the Seahawks the Packers are going to be enormously run heavy in this game. Ty Montgomery's a guy they've talked up, but I still don't think he's going to be able to carry a full load. And the rookie running backs, it's a big game. It is a lot to ask of some of them to try and step up in a game of this magnitude. So I think we'll probably be looking at a sort of 65-35 split in favour of the pass. I don't expect those guys to have a big impact. If they do, I'm expecting them to try and get outside. I don't think they're going to try and pound it up the middle. I think they would have difficulty doing so. I'd expect to see some zonal stretch type runs. Just enough to maybe establish the play action. Aaron Rodgers, I think, is going to be on the move often in this game. I think that's going to be a part of it. A lot of bootlegs, just to try and stretch those zones a little bit more, get those defenders on the move rather than sort of sitting in those zones. I think that's going to be something that they're going to have to be successful with in order to have success. At the end of the day, I think the pass rush is going to be the biggest part of this matchup. If the Seahawks can get there, then I think that gives them a huge edge in winning this game. The linebacking group, they're going to have I'm sure, have a good day against the run. Whether they can sort of keep up in coverage, be disciplined, especially when Rodgers does take off, I think that's going to be a massive, massive factor. Also, one thing I didn't mention, actually, the new tight end addition, that's going to be interesting to me. The Packers haven't utilised the tight end spot very much in recent years. However, Bennett is by far the most talented player they've had at that position. Whether they try to run to his side, whether he's going to just be erased by Cam Chancellor, I'll be interested to see. It's one of the key things I'm going to be looking at because I'm not sure what to expect. So, not got a huge amount to say on it, but it's certainly worth highlighting. It's another dangerous weapon for the Packers in this passing game. I'm just not sure this is the matchup where he's necessarily going to get too many opportunities to shine. Now, on the other side of the ball, both teams significantly less strong. You're looking at two of the top units. And this Seahawks offense, Russell Wilson was stellar last year considering the circumstances. The big concern once again will be whether this offensive line can keep him upright and protected. This isn't a horrific matchup for them. I don't think the Packers are going to have a huge amount in terms of the pass rush. Nick Perry's got paid after a productive season, but up until last year he'd been a mediocre, below average player. So if he can maintain that level of play, I think that's going to be a big deal. If he can, then that's something. Clay Matthews has looked like a shadow of his former self on the outside. So if these two can get back to, if Perry can maintain or improve upon what we saw last year and Matthews can get back, then I do think the Packers have a good chance to put a lot of pressure on Russell Wilson. I'm expecting Mike Daniels to basically have his way with whoever the Seahawks put in front of him, but I will be expecting to see him double teamed for the vast majority of the matchup. The George Fant loss, a pretty big deal for the Seahawks. I'm interested to see how Luke Jokel does at guard. I'm interested to see how Jermaine Ifedi looks this year. It's a young group, so you never know. There's always the potential for a big improvement. But I think if they can keep Mike Daniels quiet, then I think they should be able to keep Wilson reasonably clean, bearing in mind as well how good Wilson is at extending plays and potentially running with the ball. The run game, that's going to be a tough one. Seahawks have, since Marshawn Lynch left and since this offensive line has sort of declined in recent years, they have struggled to find a run game. Still not entirely clear who they're going to go with this year. Eddie Lacy, frankly, I'm expecting him to be pretty much a non-factor this season. I think Thomas Rawls, CJ Procise are probably going to be the two main guys, but it's hard to say. Rawls has just been sporadic in his productivity. He's looked great 1 minute and then not so much the next. How much of that comes down to the run blocking is certainly questionable. I think Procise, I'm not sure we'll see a lot of him in this game, but I think he'll be used more as the season goes on. I think he gives them a good option in the passing game. But I think they'll be able to have some success getting out the middle. Kenny Clark for me is a big X factor for this Packers defence. The first round pick of a year ago. Need to see him develop. If he can, then him and Mike Daniels will form a pretty good pair on that line. But if he can't, then I just don't think they've got enough elsewhere on the defensive line to slow too many teams down. Whether this week is the week it's going to be a huge problem for them, I'm not so sure, but they are going to have to get some pressure on Wilson. This secondary, it isn't the best, and the Seahawks do have some weapons, and I think with a healthier Wilson this year, he's going to be able to use them. Doug Baldwin, I think, is one of the best receivers in the league, and I think similarly to Nelson and Rodgers, Baldwin and Wilson have that same kind of style of play down. When things break down, Baldwin's the guy that Wilson looks to, finds him, and he regularly makes big plays through that. I don't know if this team matches up well to Jimmy Graham. How much he's going to be used, you never know. It seems very hit or miss on a weekly basis between Wilson and Graham. But I can't see anyone on this roster that looks like a good matchup there. I think Clinton-Dix has to be more concerned with trying to keep Doug Baldwin in check, and that leaves some issues as to who's going to deal with Morgan Burnett. I don't think has the athleticism to deal with with Jimmy Graham from the safety position, so I think he offers a real potential mismatch. And then they've still got some speed. I mean, Tyler Lockett and I think Paul Richardson, who really flashed last year, are both going to present threats down the field, and the Packers just struggled with coverage last year, and if they can't get that pass rush, I think those wideouts are primed to have some big plays in this game. As a result of all that, I do think I have to give the edge to the Seahawks in this matchup. I think the Packers will keep it close, but I think somewhere down the line, the Seahawks defense, I just trust them to make a play, and I don't see the Packers having enough. I really think Russell Wilson's going to have a stellar season. I think this is a really tough matchup for this Packers defense, having that kind of a secondary with that. When you're lacking a pass rush against a team where the primary issue is the offensive line, I don't think you get to maximise that. And the weapons the Seahawks have, I think they're the best they've had in a while in the passing game. Just those extra bits of experience that some of these youngsters have, Graham being there another year, and I think this year with Wilson being healthy, I just think it's going to be a bit too much for this Packers defence to handle. You never know, some of these guys in the secondary could step up, but I just don't know what they're going to look like. I mean, Ladarius Gunter really struggled towards the end of last season. It looks like a soft group. I think Micah Hyde being missing is a big deal. Well, not missing, he's gone to Buffalo, but I think that's going to hurt them. I don't think they've got a lot of depth or talent in the secondary. I mean, they've got some youngsters. First round pick in, was it Desmond King? Or Kevin King? No, they went with Kevin King. I don't know if this is a great way for him to begin his NFL career. Pretty tough matchup. But I just think the Packers, they're gonna have some production, but I think their offense is going to be a bit too limited, and I trust the Seahawks to get a takeaway or two in there somewhere, whether it's from forcing fumbles, possibly picking up a pick. That I've got to say, I don't know what to expect from the Seahawks in terms of the game plan. I think it's going to probably be a pretty run-heavy approach they take early on, and then they'll realise that's probably not going to be the most effective thing. They'll start slinging it, and I think they're just going to have great success. I think Baldwin's going to do some fantastic work on the outside, and he'll open some stuff up for some of the speedier guys one-on-one down the field. I just think they're going to have their hands full in the Packers secondary, and it just won't be good enough at the end of the day. So I'd say the Seahawks, I think they take this one by a score of about 30-24, but I don't think it necessarily looks as close. I think the Packers end up falling behind and chasing. Now, if the Packers are to win this game, I think it'll be because they get an early lead, force the Seahawks to sort of play on the back foot a little bit, because I think if the Seahawks can get comfortable, then defensively they're just going to be able to pretty much do what they usually do, try and keep things in front of them, hit guys, and just bring pressure with 4. If they fall behind, the protection's good, then they might have to force it a bit, and that's where I think Rodgers can have some success with some of those ad-libbed plays against the, what will be a lesser coverage in terms of numbers. That's what I think the Packers need to try and do. If they fall behind early, I just think chasing against this team's very difficult. You'll see the Seahawks put an emphasis on running the ball. I think Wilson will see that as a rein to also take off on the outside. I think that can weaken the interior for some of those runs up the gut from Thomas Rawls, and it'll open up the play action. And if that's the case, the Seahawks have their whole playbook to work with. I simply think they'll have far too much firepower, and that's what I see happening. I think they pull away early. The Packers do enough to keep it close, but they never quite get there. So I've got the Seahawks taking this one. So there you have it. That's my view on this matchup. Certainly one of the most intriguing ones of this weekend, and it's definitely the one I'll be watching live at 9 o'clock. So as always, let me know, what do you guys think? Are you looking forward to the season? I know I am. Enjoyed last night's game. Absolutely shattered, but it was worth it. Always fun to see the Patriots lose. If you let us know what you think, whether it's the comment section below, the Cover Zero Facebook page. You can find me on Twitter at Simon Conboy. Always happy to talk football. And if you've enjoyed this, check out some more. I've got my game recap up of the Chiefs-Patriots game last night. I think that was my first one of that series, so I think they'll get a bit more refined, but I think it was pretty good. And there'll be a couple more previews going up. Not had time, it turns out. Turns out I was pretty ambitious in finding time to preview every single game, but I'll get as many done as I can for the weekend. And similar next week, I'll preview and review every single game I can. Check out the weekly roundtables. They'll be the most thorough in terms of brief coverage of every game. The individual episodes, hoping they're going to have a bit more detail. So if you could like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon, it'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for your time. Have a great evening, and go Bucks.